Okay, tonight's after chapter 10.
And it came to pass that Shez, who was a descendant of Heth, for Heth had perished by the famine, and all his household save it were Shez, wherefore Shez began to build up again a broken people. And it came to pass that Shez did remember the destruction of his fathers, and he did build up a righteous kingdom, for he remembered what the Lord had done in bringing Jared and his brother across the deep, and he did walk in the ways of the Lord, and he begat sons and daughters. And his eldest son, whose name was Shez, did rebel against him. Nevertheless, Shez was smitten by the hand of a robber because of his exceeding riches, which brought peace again unto his father. And it came to pass that his father did build up many cities upon the face of the land, and the people began again to spread over all the face of the land. And Shez did live to an exceeding old age, and he begat Riplakish, and he died, and Riplakish reigned in his stead.
Right, so we start chapter 10, right, it mentions a king named Shez, and it says now he's a descendant of Heth. Heth was the last king who was mentioned at the end of chapter 9, so as I read this, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was his son. In fact, I would assume it's not his son, otherwise it would have said it's his son, because he was a descendant of Heth, so whether that means it was his nephew, or his grandson, or whatever, right? It's unclear, but it's just in that line where he became the next king. Right, so it says that the Shez was the next king, and it says for Heth had perished in the famine, which we talked about. It was at the end of chapter 9, all right, the famine that God sent to get the people's attention. So that particular king had died, and now it says, in fact, it's interesting. It says all his household had perished except for Shez. So I guess that's why he became the new king, right? Because all of his other relatives were gone. So it's that's simple. So now it says that so Shez began to build up again a broken people, all right, because they were all affected by the famine. And you think about people going through that, and perhaps they might have complained somewhat, but at least if they repented, then there was a purpose to it, right? It wasn't just a punishment to be mean to people, but rather to get their attention that they would repent. And sometimes in our lives we may go through things where it may also be for that purpose. Sometimes we can't tell, but it could be God trying to get our attention for something, and if he does, then that's a good thing. All right, so now it says Shez, this particular Shez was more of a righteous king, and notice what he did in verse 2 is that Shez remembered what happened to the people when they were not righteous, right? That there was a lot of destruction, right? And he even remembered back farther that he thought of their history in how God brought them across. I mean, not him in particular, but his ancestors now brought him across the deep. Jared and the brother of Jared started saying, hey, when somebody serves God can do miraculous things, bring them across the water and so forth. And when they don't, then all this destruction that surrounds us. So it was, again, a good lesson to have learned, and then to put that into action in terms of being the king. Says, okay, we're going to make this a serving God kind of kingdom, because good things happen when you serve God, and not so good things happen when you don't. So that, therefore he implemented a more righteous kingdom. Right? And so it says, and he did walk in the ways of the Lord and begat sons and daughters. Okay, now his oldest son was also named Shez, right? So not to be confused, right? So I guess they don't use the terms junior and senior here, right? But so basically there was a Shez senior and a Shez junior, right? And he'll just say, since Shez junior was more of the rebellious one, it says in 3, it says his oldest son did rebel against him. Nevertheless, Shez junior, I'll put it in so we know who's who, was smitten by the hand of a robber, all right, because of his exceeding riches. So I guess Shez Jr. must have been a moneymaker as well, and but so somebody actually robbed him to get his money and killed him, right? And so in this particular case, it says it brought peace again unto his father, Shez Sr., who was the king. And so that's why in 4 it says it came to pass that his father built many cities. So I guess the writer knew it would be confusing and just keep saying Shez when in all these verses, and then you're not going to know which Shez is which, right? So in this case, it was the father, so that's why I'm saying junior and senior. But so the father built up many cities upon the face of the land, and now eventually he's going to pass the kingdom on to another son whose name was Riplakish. Shez Jr. might have been in line for the kingdom, but he was rebelling and then eventually killed by a robber, so instead the kingdom passes to Riplakish.
And it came to pass that Riplakish did not do that which was right in the sight of the Lord, for he did have many wives and concubines, and did lay that upon men's shoulders which was grievous to be borne. Yea, he did tax them with heavy taxes, and with the taxes he did build many spacious buildings. And he did erect himself an exceedingly beautiful throne, and he did build many prisons, and whoso would not be subject unto taxes he did cast into prison, and whoso was not able to pay taxes he did cast into prison. And he did cause that they should labor continually for their support, and whoso refused to labor he did cause to be put to death. Wherefore he did obtain all his fine work, yea, even his fine gold, he did cause to be refined in prison, and all manner of fine workmanship he did cause to be wrought in prison. And it came to pass that he did afflict the people with his whoredoms and abominations. And when he had reigned for the space of 42 years, the people did rise up in rebellion against him, and there began to be war again in the land, insomuch that Replikish was killed, and his descendants were driven out of the land.
As you can see, of course, this is Replikish, who was the new king. He was the son of Shez, and he was not a righteous king. As you can see why, it says he had many wives and concubines, right? And he taxed the people with heavy taxes. This way he didn't have to work, and they could do the work and give him the money, and then he was able to use that for his own purposes. Right? There was a king named King Noah, right, that was similar to this, and yeah, he was the one that the prophet Abinadi came to speak to, and says that King Noah had lots of wives and concubines and heavy taxes on the people, and it's a similar type of kingship that you know, where it's a very greedy person and a lazy person, right? That's why he says that he took the people's money and he used it to build himself a beautiful throne and put up prisons. And so if you don't pay the tax I said you have to pay, then we'll put you in prison, right? So it was a very dictatorial type of an arrangement. And so again, I'm sure it was not a pleasure to be a part of this kingdom, right? Because you're basically giving most of your money to the king, and if you refuse or if you can't pay, then you go to jail, right? So he says if you go to jail, and says anybody who refused to labor, he caused to be put to death, right? So it was a tough time to live there, right? And so finally it says it came to pass he did afflict the people with his whoredoms and abominations. And you know, when somebody is not a righteous person and they're the leader, well, I mean, their beliefs or their positions get cascaded down to those who were subservient, right? So if your leader is not a righteous person, well then yeah, it's probably going to rub off on you too. And so that's why I said he afflicted the others with his whoredoms and abominations. So finally, after 42 years, the people had enough. So that's why it says then they rose up in rebellion and killed the king, and that's when they ended that particular reign of time when they were afflicted that way and imprisoned and taxed and afflicted with all these whoredoms and abominations.
And it came to pass, after the space of many years, Morianton, he being a descendant of Replikish, gathered together an army of outcasts, and went forth and gave battle unto the people. And he gained power over many cities, and the war became exceeding sore, and did last for the space of many years. And he did gain power over all the land, and did establish himself king over all the land. And after that he had established himself king, he did ease the burden of the people, by which he did gain favor in the eyes of the people, and they did anoint him to be their king. And he did do justice unto the people, but not unto himself, because of his many whoredoms, wherefore he was cut off from the presence of the Lord.
As we just said at the end of verse 8, that says Replikish the king was killed. Now it would appear that there was no immediate obvious successor maybe, all right, unless there's something left out. But that's why it says, because it says Replikish was killed and his descendants were driven out of the land, right, at the end of verse 8. So it would sound like there was no immediate successor, so it was kind of up for grabs at this point. And so that's why in 9 it says it came to pass after the space of many years, which I don't know how many years that would be, that someone named Morianton, who I guess was a descendant of Replikish, got enough of an army together that he established himself as the king. Right? So notice he says he gathered together an army of outcasts. Right? So an army of outcasts, and then they went forth and gave battle, and says after a while then he gained power and became king. Right? So if there was some other king in between that's not mentioned here in the history, so it sounds like it went right from Replikish to Morianton, and I don't know what they did in between. Now in 10 you see it says that after he became king, he says, you know, he saw the way that people had to live under Replikish, and so it says he eased the burden of the people, right, which gave him some good points among the people. I'm sure he cut down the taxes and made that people could actually just work and earn their own living. They didn't have to go to jail and work in jail and make gold and so forth. Right? It says he eased the burden of the people, which allowed them to gain favor among the people, and they were happy to anoint him their king. But now notice in 11 it says he did do justice unto the people, but not unto himself, because of his many whoredoms, wherefore he was cut off in the presence of the Lord. So what you had here was a man who, perhaps was a decent king, right? Perhaps was a decent leader, cared perhaps for the people and wanted to do right by them, but yet was not a man of God. Right? That's why it says he committed many whoredoms and was cut off in the presence of the Lord. So it's interesting the way it's worded. It says he did do justice unto the people, but not unto himself. So that he wasn't a servant of God, but yet I guess he tried to do a decent job as the king. Which, if we look at things in our world today, somebody can be an effective leader, say in government, and not necessarily be a person of God, all right? My preference is that you have people of God in these kind of positions, all right? But it's not necessarily one and the same. That you can have people who can effectively run a company, can effectively run a government, whatever, and not be a person of God, right? So that certainly is a possibility. So that's what it would sound like here. He was an okay king, but not a man of God.
And it came to pass that Morianton built up many cities, and the people became exceeding rich under his reign, both in buildings, and in gold and silver, and in raising grain, and in flocks, and herds, and such things which had been restored unto them. And Morianton did live to an exceeding great age, and then he begat Kim. And Kim did reign in the stead of his father, and he did reign 8 years, and his father died. And it came to pass that Kim did not reign in righteousness, wherefore he was not favored of the Lord. And his brother did rise up in rebellion against him, by which he did bring him into captivity, and he did remain in captivity all his days, and he begat sons and daughters in captivity, and in his old age he begat Levi, and he died.
All right, so the same Morianton that we just spoke about, says that Morianton says in trying to be a good king, it says built up many cities, and again, it would lead me to believe that he, from a secular perspective, he was a decent leader, right? Because as the people became exceedingly rich under his reign, so he was good for the economy, I guess is the way you could put it, right? He promoted a good economy. The people were able to get some wealth. In buildings, gold, silver, grain, flocks, herds, and so forth, right? So the people were doing well, so they were probably happy with him as the king, right? But yet, still not a man of God, but he was doing an okay job as the king. And so that's why it says he lived to an exceeding great age, so they enjoyed a period of prosperity, and then finally he passed the torch to his son Kim, right? Who was apparently not a righteous person, and so that he took over as the king. He didn't necessarily, he did not reign in righteousness. He was not favored of the Lord. It didn't say whether he was as good a king as his father, right? But it says his brother rose up and put him in captivity, and so like I said, it's a similar kind of story we've heard with other people. In captivity, he says he's got sons and daughters, and then one in particular was named Levi, who's going to take over as the next king.
And it came to pass that Levi did serve in captivity after the death of his father for the space of 42 years. And he did make war against the king of the land, by which he did obtain unto himself the kingdom. And after he had obtained unto himself the kingdom, he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and the people did prosper in the land, and he did live to a good old age, and begat sons and daughters, and he also begat Coram, whom he anointed king in his stead. And it came to pass that Coram did that which was good in the sight of the Lord all his days, and he begat many sons and daughters, and after he had seen many days he did pass away, even like unto the rest of the earth, and Kish reigned in his stead. And it came to pass that Kish passed away also, and Lib reigned in his stead.
All right, so let's just start with Levi. It says Levi served in captivity after the death of his father, because his father had been in captivity. It's saying that as a king, that he lived in captivity, right? I mean, it's not that he was in prison, right? But I assume it was, I don't know if you want to call it house arrest, or basically some kind of confinement, as you've been saying, all right, where he probably couldn't leave the city, or was confined as to where he could go. So I mean, I guess it was, like I said, I think it was being in prison, but yet you were still confined, so you were limited in what you could do, and so therefore the effect you could have for the kingdom. So he was confined in some way. And so now, as it said in 15, it says Levi did serve in captivity at the death of his father for 42 years. all right, and then, but eventually he, I guess, broke through on that and became the king by challenging the king to war, right? And so, so he was the king. This is he had sons and daughters. He passed it on to his son Joram, right? And then Joram was the king, and they passed it on to his son Kish, and Kish passed on to his son Lib. All right, so it's just keeping track though of who passed it to who, just from the perspective of a history, right? And as I recall, if we were to go back to chapter 1, right, there was like a whole genealogy of who was the father of who was the father of who, and this is really where it came from, right? Because the history was kept up like this. They were able to have a whole genealogy starting with the Jared, the brother Jared, and working all the way down to Ether, right, who was the last one in the line, and Ether, of course, being the one who wrote the record then, the book of Ether.
And it came to pass that Lib also did that which was good in the sight of the Lord. And in the days of Lib, the poisonous serpents were destroyed. Wherefore they did go into the land southward to hunt food for the people of the land, for the land was covered with animals of the forest. And Lib also himself became a great hunter. And they built a great city by the narrow neck of land, by the place where the sea divides the land. And they did preserve the land southward for a wilderness to get game, and the whole face of the land northward was covered with inhabitants.
Give a little bit of geographical notes here associated with the reign of Lib, all right? Because this is in the days of Lib, the poisonous serpents were destroyed. Now, the poisonous serpents refer to the ones that were sent at the end of the previous chapter as part of the curse or the plague that came from God. And in particular, they blocked off the access to a certain part of the land. So that's why it says now the poison serpents were destroyed. So now they were able to use all the land again, right? Because they were gone. So it says that's why wherefore they did go into the land southward, and they were able to become hunters. In fact, even the king became a hunter. He says, hey, we got access to something we never had access to before. Because really many years had passed here that, even though we've only seen it as one chapter, 20 verses or something, but yet several of them say 42 years passed or this many years passed, or really a few hundred years have passed just in this chapter. And so if you're cut off from a certain part of the land for a few hundred years, that basically just doesn't even exist to you, right? Because you think of whatever year it is now, if you go back 400 years, I mean, if some part of this area wasn't available 400 years, it doesn't even exist as far as I'm concerned, all right? So here now suddenly the serpents are gone, and it's like, hey, we got new land here, and we can go hunt, and we can provide food for ourselves, and so that's why they said they became hunters. And they even organized it. They said, you know what? All right, we got this part of the land here, and this part of the land here. So this part we're not going to knock down the trees or the wilderness. We're going to leave that for hunting. All right, so let that be the woods and the wilderness. And this part over here is where we'll all live. So they preserved some of the land for the more natural part, and then the other part was the developed part. So right, and that's why it says they built a great city. Right, so it says they preserved the land southward for a wilderness, and the land northward was covered with the inhabitants. So the one part was developed, and the other part wasn't. Okay, now if you look at a map, you can see that where it says you can look for a narrow neck of land, and so that's why it's parts like this that allow people to try to pinpoint where these episodes took place, right? Because they look for like a narrow neck of land that's surrounded by water, where there's some land and a little piece, and then more land below that. So they try to pick out places on a map of like the Central and South America. Say, okay, this could happen right here based on this description. See, sometimes people have tried to say maybe this is around, say, where the Panama Canal might be, for example, right? Or they look for places like that. Those kind of descriptions where you look for it, try to match it up to the way the geography looks and figure, okay, this could have happened right here based on the description.
And they were exceeding industrious, and they did buy and sell and traffic one with another, that they might get gain. And they did work in all manner of ore, and they did make gold and silver and iron and brass and all manner of metals, and they did dig it out of the earth. Wherefore they did cast up mighty heaps of earth to get ore of gold and of silver and of iron and of copper. And they did work all manner of fine work. And they did have silks and fine twined linen, and they did work all manner of cloth, that they might clothe themselves from their nakedness.
You notice that where you have sections like this where it describes the people being very blessed, right? It says, they were exceedingly industrious and so forth. Typically that's being overseen by a good king, right? And so I look back just to make sure here, and it says, Lib at the beginning of 19, it says, Lib did that which was good in the sight of the Lord, right? So this was, in this particular case, a righteous king who was also a good king, and so they prospered, the people did. As you see, it says they were exceedingly industrious, it said, buy and sell. And actually, the use of the word traffic here I found interesting. It almost sounds like something you use today, like drug trafficking or something, but it's not talking about drugs, right? But it says they did buy and sell and traffic one another. Basically, they interacted with each other and did business with each other, right? So that they might get gain, right? And so some of the things that they got in 23 see gold, silver, iron, brass, and so forth, and silks and linen and cloth and so forth, that they were able to make clothes. So they were doing well, all right? They had with the things they needed, and their businesses were doing well. They were doing business with each other, and they were prospering financially, and they were being blessed in this time with Lib as their king.
And they did make all manner of tools to till the earth, both to plow and to sow and to reap and to hoe and also to thrash. And they did make all manner of tools with which they did work their beasts. And they did make all manner of weapons of war, and they did work all manner of work of exceedingly curious workmanship. And never could be a people more blessed than were they, and more prospered by the hand of the Lord. And they were in a land that was choice above all lands, for the Lord had spoken it.
All right, so continuing with the way the people were blessed during this period of time, says they made all manner of tools, so this way they were able to do their farming. That's why it says to plow, to sow, to reap, to hoe, to thrash. Okay, the tools for their animals. They even prepare themselves weapons of war, although there was no talk of war at this point, but this way they had an arsenal of weapons should they be needed. Right? And then it says they did work, all manner of work of exceedingly curious workmanship. There was something in the early part of the Book of Mormon that was referred to being of curious workmanship. It was something called the Liahona, which was the ball or director, where the Lehi and Nephi in the very first part of the book is that they looked and they told them which way to go. It had the arrows or the spindles that pointed the way to go, and the writing on there that worked based on their faith, and it was called the ball of curious workmanship. Right? Now, I'm not saying that that's what they built here, but this is the only other time I saw the phrase curious workmanship, so I thought right away of the ball of curious workmanship, all right? Which to me, if you're talking about something that's made of curious workmanship, it just means that looking at it, maybe it's not clear how it was even built. So that to me would have to indicate that God was somehow in the matter, right? Because a lot of things that you build, obviously, is very common how to build them. If you know how to do it, you do it. You make them one after another. Somebody else looks at it, they know how it's put together. Like you say, you look at a car today, right? You lift the hood. If you know about cars, you know where the parts are, and the same parts need to be there, and an engine and so forth all needs to be there, and you can find what you need, and you can fix a car, right? But to me, a car of curious workmanship would mean you lift the hood, and there's like nothing there that you've ever seen before, right? How does the car even work, right? How does it go, all right? Well, that would be one of curious workmanship, because it wouldn't be clear how it was put together. Right, so that's what this means to me. It's maybe something that was more inspired by God of the things that they were able to do and put together. Right, and so as you can see in 28, it says, never could a people be more blessed than they were, right? Because they were blessed by God in all these different ways, right? And they were living in a land that was choice above all the lands, because that's what the Lord said. I mean, way back at the beginning with the brother of Jared, said, we're going to bring you to a land of promise, get you away from the Tower of Babel and all the other stuff going on there, to bring you to a land of promise, to a choice land. The Lord had spoken it, and he brought them there. They're serving God, so now they're a blessed people.
And it came to pass that Lib did live many years, and begat sons and daughters, and he also begat Hartham. And it came to pass that Hartham reigned in the stead of his father, and when Hartham had reigned 24 years, behold, the kingdom was taken away from him, and he served many years in captivity, yea, even all the remainder of his days. And he begat Heth, and Heth lived in captivity all his days. And Heth begat Aaron, and Aaron dwelt in captivity all his days. And he begat Amnigaddah, and Amnigaddah also dwelt in captivity all his days. And he begat Coriantum, and Coriantum dwelt in captivity all his days. And he begat Com.
So we just finished reading about a period of prosperity for the people under the kingdom of Lib. And so it says Lib did live many years, which again was a good thing, since the people were having a blessed time. And then, of course, and then finally it says he begat sons and daughters, and then finally turned the kingdom over to his son, who we're going to call Hartham. Right? And so he then reigned instead of his father 24 years. he was in captivity, as we were describing earlier, what it means to live in captivity, so that this king did also. Now in 31, you see a whole bunch of passing from one to another, right? So I'm just glad we're not trying to list these on the board here, right? Because there's probably about 5 or 6 different king names here in 31 that just went down through the years. So I guess nothing notable or remarkable in their kingdoms that they would need to list here in the history, but just to keep track of the names. This way they were able to continue the lineage and keep a record of who was king and whose families was under whose families and so forth.
And it came to pass that Com drew away the half of the kingdom, and he reigned over the half of the kingdom 42 years. And he went to battle against the king Amgid, and they fought for the space of many years, during which time Com gained power over Amgid, and obtained power over the remainder of the kingdom. And in the days of Com there began to be robbers in the land, and they adopted the old plans, and administered oaths after the manner of the ancients, and sought again to destroy the kingdom. Now Com did fight against them much, nevertheless he did not prevail against them.
Okay, so you see here in verse 32, it says that Com, who was the descendant of Heth here, it says he drew away the half of the kingdom. So in other words, he's seeking to take it back from whoever took it away from Hartham back in verse 30. Right? And now in 32 it names the king as being named Amgid. Right? Now based on how many generations passed, I mean Amgid may have not been the one who originally took the kingdom away, but maybe it was the descendant of who did. But that was, I'm guessing, the family that had taken it away back in verse 30. So now in 32 it says Com rises up on behalf of his family and says first takes half the kingdom, and then after some more time passes, says he gained power over Amgid and obtained power over the remainder of the kingdom. So he took it back for this family which had been in charge before that, right? So I guess you lose some, you win some, right? You lose some battles, you win some battles, and when you win, then you're in power again, right? So now as it goes on to 33, it says in the days of Com there began to be robbers in the land, and I think the use of the word robbers is more or less to point out, it says they adopted the old plans, in other words, the oaths and so forth that we've read about in previous chapters, which also later on were used by the Gadianton robbers. That's why I think he's using the word robbers, because otherwise it would seem like, all right, there were robbers in the land, people that wanted to take things that didn't belong to them. But I mean, really, it's referring to the Gadianton robbers who used all the old oaths. That's why it says the old plans were being adopted. They administered oaths after the manner of the ancients, sought to destroy the kingdom. Right, so it says Com did try to fight against them, but he was kind of fighting a losing battle at this point, because this was catching on yet once again. It seems like every few hundred years this comes back around, and they were using these things for evil and for evil purposes. So at this point he's fighting a losing battle, which we'll find out in the next chapter how his family does fighting against that.